Hi, I'm Drew, and I'm an amateur model builder. I'm building a layout in my basement called the White River Line, inspired by the Frisco Railroad in the Ozarks. In this episode, I've got a lot of track work to do. I'm going to get started here on the peninsula, and then if I've got time, I'm going to head back over here and work on the rail yard. I'm really hoping over the next few months to get all of this track work done and put in the electrical and build my DCC system. And, well, hopefully if I have a little bit of time, I've got a scratch build project in mind. But it feels like a lot of that is a long way off. So let's jump on into it. The first thing I need to do is fix some of the work from my last track laying video. I forgot to drill a hole underneath the switch coming off the main line that will be used later for the switch machine that will control this turnout. So I carefully pulled it up and drilled a 3/8 inch hole. With this complete, I started laying down the rest of the main line in this section. With some difficulty, I slipped on a rail joiner and unlinked the rail and clipped and filed it. I spiked it at the start where it connects to the switch, and then at the other end at the liftgate. I used this little gauge to help me figure out where to place the rail so they will be approximately centered on the ties. Then I marked every 8th tie with a T-pin. I spiked the rail in the middle, then about a quarter of the way. Then I used a straight edge as I spiked down the rest of the ties to keep the rail as straight as possible. Then I went back and spiked in between each of them so that the rail is spiked every 4th tie. Once the second bit of rail was trimmed and filed, I used my 3-point track gauges to spike it down. When joining a new piece of track, I spike it down at the first 3 ties just to make sure that the joint is nice and secure. I also make sure to stagger the placement of the spikes down the length of the rail so they are offsetting for the opposite rails. I got a little bit annoyed by a bit of the rail flopping around while I was working, so I went ahead and spiked it down before finishing the rest. I probably should have done that in the first place. With this section complete, I moved on to installing the switches here in the peninsula. I removed the number 2 switches from their temporary placement and marked the placement of the hole for the switch machine for the number 5 Y switch. I pre-drilled several holes in the switch's ties. My spikes aren't sharp enough or strong enough to go through the plywood these ties are made of. Then I drilled the hole for this Y switch's future switch machine. I reconnected this Y switch to the track coming into this section. I'd laid this section of track a few months ago. I added a basswood tie to bridge the gap between this Y switch and the next switch. I spent some time adjusting these switches, trying to line them up. I had originally planned to finalize the placement for each switch one at a time, but I decided it would probably work better to drill the switch machines for each of the holes and then pin them all in place at once before spiking them down. I also decided to place rail joiners on all the ends before spiking them down. This would avoid some of the struggles I had earlier trying to slip rail joiners onto rails that are already installed. Now that the switches are in place, I contemplated which spur I wanted to work on next. I think I'll do the spur with the S-curve in it that will lead to the lumberyard and milling works. I started by marking every 8th tie. I do this so that I don't have to think about the spacing of my spikes while I'm doing the spiking. The fewer things I have to think about at one time, the fewer mistakes I'm likely to make. I join the rail to the switch. Then I use some T-pins and curve the rail to the approximate shape of this S-curve. Then I spike the rail down using my little styrene gauge to get its position correct. Here in the center section of the S-curve, I did my best to get about 6 inches of straight track. This is the length of most of my rolling stock, and the straight section should help with smoother operation. Then I continued on with the S-curve. I had to add a little bit of extra rail. I'll solder it together later. I'm feeling too lazy to get my soldering iron out right now. However, I would have soldered it as I laid it down if this joint were on a curve. After reaching the end, I went back and spiked every 4th rail. I added the 2nd rail. I then moved on to the 2nd spur in this section. I haven't quite decided what to put on this spur. If you've got suggestions, please add them in the comments below. This spur is just tangent track, straight, which actually feels a little more challenging than curved track. The imperfections are easier to see. Now it is time to add this last spur. After spiking down the rail where it joins the switch, I use some T-pins to shape the curve. I need to figure out a more efficient way to do this. Again, I marked every 1/8 tie. I joined a bit of track here. Since it's on a curved section, I soldered the joint before spiking it down. This helps keep the line of the curve smooth. You can see here how each piece of rail is at a slightly different angle at this section of track where I didn't solder the joint. A section I'm going to need to fix. I finished spiking it down to the end, and then went back to the start and filled in every 4th tie, like normal. I do this technique every 8th tie first, and then filling in, because I feel like the spacing of every 8th tie allows the rail's shape to flow naturally and smoothly. It can go a little wobbly when I do every 4th tie right from the start. I moved on to the second rail. These 3-point track gauges are really helpful. However, the rail can move around as I spike them down and go out of gauge. After spiking down the rail, I move the gauge along the rails, and if it moves smoothly, I'm good to go. If it binds up a little and gets tight, I know I'm slightly out of gauge. In these cases, I go back with my NMRA gauge and make adjustments to get it back into gauge. Sometimes I have to pull the spikes out altogether. Sometimes I can just twist them a little bit to nudge the rail in the right direction. I soldered on the last bit of rail and finished up spiking this down. Now all the rail for this industrial section is installed. I still have a fair amount of track work left to do. My rail yard is next, but I'm done for now. I've been mostly just doing track work for the last few months, and I'm ready for a break from this. So next, I think I'm going to get started on a kit bash project I found in an old book. It's a lumber yard and millwork that will sit on the peninsula. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook. Those links are below, along with a list of the supplies, materials, and resources I've used. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook. Those links are below, along with a list of the supplies, materials, and resources I used. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave me a like. It's the easiest way to support my videos. Subscribing is always helpful too, and deeply appreciated. If you'd like to support me further, you can find a link to an Amazon wish list below. I've got lots of items there for future projects for my layout. Thanks again for watching, and please join me again next time as I continue modeling the White River Line.